The old school of thought says this, that before you learn to defend yourself against a weapon, you should know something about the basic way the weapon is used. Simply because of this. Martial arts and weapons defense is not a fantasy made up by a martial arts instructor. There are a lot of different and varying factors that come into play that individuals that practice weapons defenses don't even begin to understand. And so therefore, they do by rote techniques that have been passed down to them without taking into consideration the real factors. The small studies that I did in Ninpo were very interesting because with Ninpo, they would now take a completely different approach to the weapons. Many times in Ninpo, we had the weapon held on us. That would be the weapon at the last possible second that you would have to defend from. Then from there, the weapon would now move away. Unlike most karateka and taekwondo individuals that have the weapon approach from the outside and then close in. But that's a lesson for a different day. Let's just talk about weapons in particular. Here I have a couple of basic weapons, some real, some not in front of me. First thing is first. I can call these weapons dirty names. I can dare the weapon to come and get me. I can do all kinds of things to try to have the weapon become angered enough to reach itself off the table and get me. But nothing's going to happen. These are inanimate objects. And these objects only become animate when there's an animate creature that's wielding them. Now, the animate creature has limitations. And so we're going to go over some of the limitations that the animate creature has. And that way you'll begin to understand how weapons are used. And I'll give you a simplistic system that I follow in my schools, which you're able now to have an understanding of how to wield basic weaponry. Not advanced, just basic. Weapons are extensions. Extensions of the arm. My arm from my torso is an extension that's able to reach out from my body. If I needed to reach further, if I put some form of an extension into my arm, I now have a further reach. What's the advantage? First of all, imagine this. I'm the target and you have a weapon. You see me as the target, but the area around me you see we'll call the panorama. When you attempt to attack me, you have your weapon in your hand, and your weapon reaches out and attacks things that are intimidating you coming from the panorama. That's point number one. Now, let me take your point of view. So, all weaponry is based on this. So I turn my body. I have a safe zone which I have created behind my weapon. What I want to do is I want to strike out, block, move, whatever I have to do, while maintaining the safety of my safe zone. The ultimate safe zone weapon, for example, would be a gun. The projectiles that come out will now reach out into the panorama and do damage. Meanwhile, from the position of my safe zone, I can now aim and shoot my target. All weapons are designed to attack the panorama. Let's take a basic bludgeoning kind of weapon like a club. What are its abilities? What are its inabilities? Again, I'll show you from the front. From the front, this weapon must follow what my wrist does. So therefore, if I'm in close, then my wrist does this, my wrist does this, my wrist does this. We had this in a formal lesson. My wrist does this. The magical martial arts figure eight is the illusion that follows the motion of the wrist. Nothing mystical, nothing magical. It's the way that the wrist is designed to go. If I'm in close quarters with the weapon, then I must use the actions of the wrist. We would call that being able to see only 1/3 of the body in close, 1/3 range. As I took a step or a step and a half back, I would see the body from here to the navel. I would call that 2/3 range. And in 2/3 range, not only do I use the motions of the wrist, but now the motions of the elbow begin to move into the technique. So now I have a wider range and a longer range of motion extending away from my safe zone. Finally, when the opponent is at the maximum range where I can see his entire body, but he's still in reachable distance of my weapon, then what I want to do is I want to use the ball and socket of my arm, and I reach and strike in various and sundry ways so that I have maximum reach. In the course of combat, those ranges intermittently change very quickly. So the result is that the individual has to be skilled to be able to revert his body and his inanimate object to objectify and safely operate in its best perfection to protect himself. That brings me now to an old thing. In World War I, the British Commandos came up with a basic idea of how to use the bayonet, that is the knife on the end of a rifle, and also rifle drills for close quarter combat. And they came up with a very, very interesting figure. That figure is an interesting thing and can be introduced to help a person to learn basic combat. Imagine, if you would, a human torso standing. At the top of the head, we'll number things. Why do they use numbers? Because rather than saying left side of the face, right side of the face, top of the head, the body, especially when it's thinking in terms of combat, assimilates numbers much faster than it does technique coming from the side lateral. And so therefore, the top of the head is known as the 6. This opposite side of the head is known as the 2. This side and angle of the head is known as the 1. Moving here to the torso, this is the 4 coming this direction. This is the 3 coming this direction. Coming up and under, this would be an 8. This would be a 7. Coming directly up the middle would be a 9. Striking directly into the torso, that would be a 5 and a 5. So, when you learn your combinations of motions, let's say, for example, with the stick, I would do 2, 1, 6, or I would do 4, 3, 6, or 5, 1, 2. Once you start to understand the basic ways and you see the figure next to me, then you make smooth transitions of techniques. And that would be, again, according to the ranges that you had. At the longest range, it would be a full extension of the arm doing the techniques. At the medium range would be the elbow and the wrist doing the techniques. At the closest range, it would be the wrist doing the techniques. Now, this same thing applies to almost anything. From the stick, which is a bludgeon instrument, I now move into the knife. This happens to be a double-edged knife. If it was a single-edged knife, by the way, let's say this would be the single edge, I learned in my fighting arts that I wouldn't turn the wrist like this. I would move the knife this way and then turn the knife in my hand so the other edge would come up. But this is a double-edged knife. I have no reason to do that. But again, let's look at the same kind of combination. 1, 2, 6. I'll do it from the wrist part. 1, 2, 6. I'll do it from the elbow art. 3, 4, 6. 3, 4, 6. I'll do it from the arm art. 7, 8, 1, 2. The different ranges of motion aid in the technique. Finally, does it change when we move to other things? Because of the limitation of the table, I can show you a couple of cuts. Here I have the bokken, which represents the sword. Once again, 6, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1. The old bayonet chart works. The old bayonet chart has a lot to say, even in terms of our natural extensions are for weapons which are our arms. The upper block, for example, guards the 6. Against the 1 and the 2, we have chopping blocks that do this. Against the 3-4 or 4-3, we have outside blocks. We have inside blocks. To cover the 7-8, we have the lower blocks. Extension weapons. Please don't take it out of the realm of practicality. Please keep it realistic. And notice how extension is an extension and a principle is a principle. Learn something about the use of the weapon first before you learn or attempt to learn techniques to disarm the weapon. Last point. You are not disarming the weapon. The weapon itself is an inanimate object. You must learn the function of the physiology and kinetics of the animate object, the one with the ill intention, the person. That's who must be disarmed, and that's who must be nullified. Thanks for your time.